Hey folks, Seven Nation Army is a super cool riff, as I'm sure you know, and not long ago, one of my students asked me if you could put chords to it, and I was like, nope, right? But then I thought about it, and I was like, well, I guess you could, and so I started a process to see what I could come up with, and that's what I came up with. Let me show you my thought process. I think this is really interesting. It's kind of, to me it sounds like the way piano players play, which I think is so cool. They're so sophisticated and all that. And so this is kind of a step in that direction to have a more complete sound if you're by yourself playing Seven Nation Army. Okay, so first thing, the riff. I've always played it there. I don't know, he could be here. But anyway, regardless of where it is, it's an E note. It starts on the E note. I'm starting on the E note on the 7th fret of the 5th string right here. And I'm going E, E, G, E, D, C, B, all on the 5th string. E, E, G, E, D, C, B. The reason why it's so cool to know what notes those are is because if I know what those notes are, I can play those notes. Anywhere I can play those notes, I can play the riff. So if this is E, E, G, E, then, well, I have an E on the 1st string open. E, E, 3rd fret is G. E, E, G, E, just like this is. E, E, G, E. Now, the difference is, this second one is 1 octave higher than the first one. And basically what it is, it's like this E, this note here, this E, same as this E. Same note, they're 1 octave apart. So, I'm playing the riff 1 octave higher. But now I need a D, E, E, G, E, D. I happen to know 2nd string, 3rd fret is a D. This is why it's good to know your fretboard. But honestly, thinking about riffs this way will help you learn the fretboard. So instead of just trying to memorize it, if you learn, the notes you're playing and the stuff you're playing, that'll get you there, really, actually pretty efficiently. So anyway, E, E, G, E, D, 2nd string, 3rd fret, C, 2nd string from the bottom, 1st fret, then B open. E, E, G, E on the 1st string, D, C, B on the 2nd string. Okay, same notes, 1 octave higher. Now let's figure out how I figure out what chords might go with that. Well, E, if I hear an E note to start out with, the first thing I'm going to try is an E chord. And the E chord doesn't sound bad. It sounds kind of cool, but I started thinking, if I'm going E, E, G, E, well, I could try E, E, G, E. That's a different vibe. It's a different rock vibe, but it's not really what I'm going for here. So instead of trying E, E, G, E, I tried an E chord with a G in it. And what that means is an E minor chord. If you'll notice, when you play E major, your index finger is on the 1st fret of the 3rd string. The 3rd string opened is G, 1st fret is G sharp. That's what makes it major. When you lift that up, it goes down a half step. It goes from a major 3rd, it goes from the 3rd note of an E scale down 1/2 step. Instead of that, do, re, mi. Instead of that, it's flat. And that makes it a minor chord. So I tried a minor chord under that. And I just strummed through all the way to the 1st string. And then I played the bit of the riff there, and I thought it sounded cool. And I was like, well, next we have a D. I was like, I don't know if I need a whole D chord there. Maybe I'll just use the pinky again while I'm holding the E minor. Which is cool because we have E minor, Put pinky down, still E minor because it's just a minor third. Back to E open, this is on the first string. Now the pinky on the second string, third fret. That's a D note, B, C, C sharp, D on the second string. That's a D note. If E is your root, it's an E minor chord. E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That D is the seventh of E. So this is an E minor 7 chord. So that first 4 notes of the riff I'm playing just from the E minor shape and playing the riff on the first and second strings. Now it goes to this C. I was like, I should probably change chords here. Let me try a C chord. That sounds pretty cool. I was like, okay, well next is a B. I was like, well, you could play a B like that, but I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, if I play a B7, my second string is going to be open, an open B, just like it is when I play the riff. So I was like, oh, if I play a B7 there and only strum to the second string, so I'm strumming strings 5, 4, 3, 2, then the last note is the note of the riff. Again, down to the first string versus all first string. This is the second string. Now the C chord strummed to the second string. And the B7 strummed to the second string, which is a B note. That B7 is especially kind of compelling, I would say, because it pulls you back to E. A dominant 7 chord like this always feels like the 5 of something, and it feels like it wants to pull you back to whatever the 1 would be. And if B is the 5, B, A, G, F, E, that's a quick way of doing it. B7 always pulls you to an E. Pulls you to E major, really. But it'll pull you to E minor as well. So, riff with the chords. Now then I started doing some hybrid picking to do the bass notes separately and kind of clean the melody up by using my fingers. So there's a bunch of cool stuff you can do in there. So that is my general process. That was what I was thinking about, how I approached that, and I thought it sounded pretty cool. The thing I really like about that is it gets to the heart of how I try to think about guitar is not simply where am I putting my fingers, but why am I putting my fingers there? Like, how do I know to do that, or how do I know to look there? It's a thought process that really just takes some fundamental knowledge of music theory, which, you know, as I make more videos, I'll certainly try to communicate those things. But it's a system of just understanding what you're doing relative to basically the major scale, but that's another conversation. Anyway, chord and melody version of Seven Nation Army. Hope you all enjoy that. I'll see you next time.